This is Survival Dispatch Remnant, and this is what it looks like when everything collapses. Then it gets worse, because the world doesn't end all at once. It breaks, piece by piece, system by system, until nothing holds. Power fails, communications go silent, supply chains choke and die, and the people waiting for someone to fix it realize no one is coming.
Season 1, Episode 7, The House on Fire. Intro. The smoke got to Casey first. He was outside Emily's door the way he always was now. Not curled, not sleeping, just settled on the floor with his front paws forward and his blocky head up, amber eyes open in the dark. It was somewhere past 3 in the morning. The house was quiet in the way collapse houses get quiet. Not peaceful, just emptied of the sounds the old world used to fill it with. No HVAC cycling, no refrigerator hum, no distant highway, just wood settling, and the particular stillness of 9 people holding their breath in different rooms. Casey's nostrils flared. He lifted his head 2 inches higher, his ears cropped short and flat against his skull, angled forward the way they did when something was wrong, at the edge of his reach. He didn't make a sound. He just stood, all 110 pounds of him, quiet as something that big has no right to be, and padded to the top of the stairs. He stopped there and stood in the dark and breathed. Mark was already awake. He'd been awake for an hour, lying on his back on top of the covers with his Glock 19 on the nightstand and his eyes fixed on the ceiling. He did this most nights now. He'd close his eyes around 10, drop into something that felt like sleep for 2 or 3 hours, and then the switch would trip and his brain would start running numbers in the dark. Perimeter, water supply. The Halverson house across the street, cleared, confirmed, empty. But empty didn't mean it stayed empty. The ditch at the stop and go, where they'd been ambushed. The hand-drawn map he'd found on the floor of the dormer. The Smith house annotated in someone else's handwriting. The child's drawing in his jacket pocket. He ran these things in sequence. Same order every night, the way he used to run quarterly projections. You check the numbers, you find the variance, you decide what to do about it. The problem was that in collapse, there was no doing anything about it at 3 in the morning. You just laid there and thought about all the ways a thing could go wrong until the light changed. He heard Casey stand up. That got him moving. He was off the bed with the Glock in hand before his feet were fully under him. Sarah stirred. She was a light sleeper, even before all this, and she was a ghost sleeper now. Mark. Her voice was a breath, not a question, a confirmation. Casey's up, he said, same volume. He was already at the bedroom door, cracking it to look into the hall. Casey was at the top of the stairs, standing, looking down. His full-length tail was straight, not wagging, not rigid, just held level, neutral, but every muscle along his back was tight. Mark went to the window first. He kept to the side of the frame, the way he'd taught himself to do, and looked out without putting his face in the glass. The street was what it always was at this hour. Dark, stripped of everything that used to make it feel normal. 3 vehicles still visible on the cul-de-sac. The Halverson house across the street, windows black. The 2 streetlights that had been dark since day 1. Then he saw it. Not the fire, not yet, the glow. It was south on the block, past the end of the cul-de-sac, where the street curved into the next section of the subdivision. An orange flicker, the kind that moves in a way porch lights and windows don't. It was down low on the horizon line of the rooftops, painting the underside of the cloud cover in shades of amber and rust. His stomach dropped in a specific way. Not the sharp drop of sudden threat, the slow drop of a situation that has already been in motion for a while, and you're just now seeing it. He went to the hall. Sarah, get up, get dressed, wake the kids. She was already swinging her legs off the bed. What is it? Fire. South end of the block. Can't tell how bad yet. Jake's door was open. He slept with it open now, the way a man does when he's decided warning matters more than privacy. Mark put his hand on the door frame and said his name once, quietly, and Jake came out of sleep like a spring releasing. 17 years old. He didn't sleep deeply anymore either. Fire, Mark said. South end. Get dressed and come down. Quiet. Jake was on his feet before Mark finished the sentence. Emily's door was still closed. Casey was still at the top of the stairs watching Mark, waiting to be told what to do with what he'd already figured out. Mark moved past him and knocked twice on Emily's door. Their signal 2 knocks means wake up now, real but not emergency, and said, Emily, get up, get dressed, boots on. A pause. Then her voice, 12 years old and already steady in the dark. Okay. The Moon family was at the far end of the hall. Grace and her 2 kids, Justin, 19, and Olivia, 11, had come through the Smith front door the morning after David Moon died in his own kitchen, and the house had reorganized itself around them the way houses do when they have to. Jake and Justin shared Jake's room. Emily and Olivia shared Emily's room. Grace had the guest room. John Moon, Grace's younger brother, who'd arrived on foot at their door during the stop-and-go crisis 3 days back, Korean-American, quiet and competent in the way of men who've trained for a long time, had the basement cot, positioned by the walkout door by his own choice and nobody's argument. Mark knocked on Grace's door. 2 knocks. Grace answered, already awake. She looked at Mark's face and said nothing. Fire south of us, he said. We're going down to assess. Get your kids up. She nodded once. Then, John's already outside. Mark looked at her. He went out the basement door 20 minutes ago, Grace said. He smelled something. Segment 1. John Moon was at the back fence when Mark came through the back door. He was standing at the southwest corner, facing south, arms loose at his sides. He'd dressed fast, cargo pants, jacket, boots laced. The way he stood was the way he always stood when he was reading something, still in the body, everything moving in the eyes. He didn't turn when Mark came up beside him, which meant he'd heard Mark, and registered him as non-threat without needing to confirm. How long have you been out here? Mark said. Little over 20 minutes. Woke up smelling it. Wanted eyes on it before I woke anyone. Why didn't you wake me? John glanced at him sideways. I was going to give it 2 more minutes. You beat me to it. A pause. It's jumped already. Mark looked south. The glow was worse from ground level without the roofline cutting his sight line. He could see 2 distinct fire signatures. The original structure, burning at full involvement with flames visible above the rooftops, and something lower and newer to its east. The second building was catching at the eaves, orange catching, not yet consumed, but committed. Which house is that? Mark said. The first one's the Whelan property or close to it, John said. Second one, Henderson's maybe. I don't know the block as well as you do. Henderson House is 4 down from us. John said nothing. The math spoke for itself. Sarah came out through the back door with her Glock at her hip. Jake came behind her, rifle on sling. Then Emily and Olivia together, close, moving the way those 2 moved now, quick and within arm's reach of each other. Grace last, Olivia's hand in hers. Casey threaded between them and posted himself at Mark's left heel. Justin, Mark called not loud. Justin Moon came around the side of the house from the street. He'd gone there on his own, without being asked. 19 years old, a bruise still fading from his shoulder. The kind of quiet that comes from holding your father's hand while he dies. He was not the boy who'd been lifting weights in his basement 10 days ago. 2 people on the street, Justin said, moving north. One of them had a bag. Nobody looking at the house. Good, Mark said. Stay on that side, holler if anything changes. Justin went back without a word. The wind gusted. Not strong. 8-10 miles per hour. Steady out of the west with occasional pushes. Enough to carry embers. The houses in this subdivision were older construction. Late 90s and early 2000s. Built close. 50 feet between them, sometimes less. October. Dry season. Leaves turning and dropping. Gutters full of fuel that nobody had cleared because the world had ended and gutters were no longer on anyone's list. Mark looked at the big red oak between their house and the Garcias next door. He looked at the Garcia gutters, dark with leaf buildup from here. He looked at the gap between the houses and thought about wind direction and fire speed and how long this had been burning before Casey smelled it. "How fast does it cross a block in conditions like this?" he said, mostly to himself. Sarah answered because she was Sarah. "Depends on the wind and what's between. Could be 2 hours. Could be 40 minutes. A beat. We don't know how long it's been burning." John said, "At least an hour. The first structure is past peak. It's been going a while." Mark absorbed this. Jake came back from the northeast corner at a low jog. His face in the firelight was tight and controlled. "3 people on the street, couple houses north," he said, 2 running south toward the fire, 1 moving north carrying stuff, arms full. Not military. Opportunists going to pick houses while the fire draws people south." Mark looked at John. John was already tracking the same logic. Fire's a distraction. Some people go to it. Smart ones go away from it. Predators go to where the evacuees are coming from. "Which means if we load a truck in this driveway," Mark said, "then anyone watching from the north side of the block knows where the goods are moving." A silence between them. Not hostile. The silence of 2 men building the same mental picture from the same facts. "We move fast," Mark said, "and we don't look like we're loading." "We're going to look like we're loading," John said flatly. "We just do it faster than they can act on it." Mark nodded once. That was the right answer, and he knew it. Emily was at the back of the yard near Grace, not with the adults but adjacent to them, watching the glow over the rooftop with her green eyes steady and measuring. Her sketch pad was nowhere. She'd come out with nothing but boots and jacket. "We're going to have to leave," she said, not a question, a notation. Mark looked at her. "I don't know yet." "The smoke's moving toward us," she said. "I can smell it from here. The wind is pushing east." A pause. "We're east." Olivia beside her said nothing. She just looked at the glow the same way Emily was looking at it. 11 years old, gray-faced, her mother's hand not in hers right now because Grace had let go to fold her arms against the chill, and Olivia was standing on her own in the dark and not reaching for it back. Mark had no answer for Emily. He turned back toward the house. "Inside," he said, "all of us, right now." Segment 2. The kitchen table, same place they'd had every hard conversation since the collapse began. Mark got the candles lit, burning supply, but there was no alternative, and he made the call, and 9 people settled around it or stood near it. Casey planted himself under the table near Emily's feet. The smell of smoke was already threading in through the window seams, faint but real. Mark laid it out plainly. No hedging. The fire was 4 to 5 houses south. Fully involved, no suppression possible. Wind steady west to east at 8 to 10 miles per hour. They were east. October conditions, dry leaves, full gutters, vulnerable roof lines. The houses between them and the source would go sequentially or by ember cast. Either way, the block was a fuel chain, and they were on it. "Best case," he said, "it burns toward us and stops short. Worst case, it reaches this house inside an hour. I don't know which it is, and I don't have a way to know." Sarah had her hands flat on the table. "There's no best case. Best case is it stops at the Garcias, and the smoke gets bad enough that staying here becomes a health problem anyway." Sarah. He said her name not as a rebuttal, but as an acknowledgement. He'd been thinking the same thing. Grace spoke. She'd been quiet since they'd come inside, but Grace's quiet was never absence. It was accumulation. When she spoke, she'd already thought through the thing from multiple angles. "We have children here," she said, simply, a statement of operational fact. "Olivia has had respiratory issues with air quality. She coughed through 2 days after the initial strikes. Smoke inhalation, for a child her size." "I know," Sarah said. "I know, Grace." "Then we're talking about packing, not weather." The table went quiet. Not hostile. The quiet that happens when a thing has been true for a while, and someone has finally said it in a room where everyone can hear it. Justin Moon was looking at the table surface, thinking about something that cost him to think about. "My dad's truck is still in the driveway," he said. "The keys are on the hook by the back door." He looked at Mark. "You kept them." Mark had kept them for a reason. David Moon's truck was a 2018 F-250 diesel extended cab full-bed diesel, parked in the Smith driveway, where Justin had moved it the morning after David died. Because the Moon driveway was a line-of-sight problem from the street, the truck had a full tank when the collapse hit. Diesel sat. It was still viable. Mark had looked at that truck every morning for 9 days and told himself it was insurance, not a plan. He looked at Justin now, 19 years old, his father's keys, the question carrying everything that wasn't being said, and understood that the boy had been sitting on this since day 3 and hadn't pushed it because he was smart enough to know that a decision like this belonged to the person running the group. "Yeah," Mark said, "I kept them for a reason." John Moon was leaning against the counter behind the table, arms crossed, listening. He'd been listening since they'd sat down, which was what he did. He collected information before he offered opinion, and when he offered opinion, it was specific and brief. "Load the truck in 2 stages," he said. "First pass, heaviest gear, food, medical, staged at the back door before anything goes to the driveway. Second pass, everything moves from the door to the truck in under 4 minutes, less driveway exposure." Mark looked at him. "You've done this before." "Similar," John said. "The principle holds." Jake had been quiet. He was across from Justin, hazel eyes working. "Where do we go?" he said. Not aggressive, honest. "North," Mark said. "Higher elevation, lower population density, away from the fallout corridor. We've talked about this." "Talking about it and having a place are different things." "I know that." "So we'd be getting in the truck and driving north and figuring it out as we go." Jake, Sarah, level. Jake put both hands on the table. "I'm not saying don't go. I'm saying we need to know what we're saying yes to before we say yes to it." He wasn't wrong. Mark had to acknowledge that internally. Getting on post-collapse roads in the dark was a different category of risk than the risks they'd been managing inside a fixed position. Movement was exposure. Every mile of unfamiliar road was a mile where someone else had already studied the ground, and they hadn't. But staying in a house on a block that was on fire had a ticking clock attached to it. Emily spoke from the far end of the table. "There's more smoke than there was 10 minutes ago." Every head turned. She wasn't being dramatic. She was reporting. Her nose was tilted slightly up the way it did when she was processing something sensory, and she was looking at the window above the kitchen sink where a faint gray seep was visible at the bottom edge of the frame. The window was closed. The smoke was coming through the seam anyway. Mark looked at it for a count of 3. Then he looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at the window, and then at Grace, and then at Olivia, who was sitting straight backed holding her mother's hand again now, watching her mother's face. "We pack," Sarah said. "Right now, on the clock. Mark decides when we leave, but we're going to be ready in 20 minutes. What followed wasn't a fight. Mark would remember that later. It was a negotiation under pressure, which was different. He and Sarah had been having productive disagreements for 19 years. They knew where the weight sat in each other's arguments. She wanted to move now. He wanted 30 more minutes to watch the fire's behavior. A fire that jumped 3 houses in 30 minutes was a different threat than a fire that jumped 1. The intel had value. She said 30 minutes of intel was worth nothing if the smoke got into Olivia's lungs in the meantime, or Emily's. He said he understood that, and that he also understood that moving blind at 3:30 in the morning on roads they hadn't scouted was a different kind of risk. She said she understood that too. John said from the counter, "The fire has already jumped once tonight. The odds of it jumping again are better than even. That's not a 30-minute question." Mark looked at him, then at Sarah. 20 minutes, he said. "Pack like we're not coming back. Essential gear only. We leave in 20. Grace Moon said, "Thank you," quietly, and was already standing. Casey came out from under the table and shook himself once, collar tags chiming softly. He looked at Mark with his amber eyes and waited. "Jake," Mark said, "you're with me and John. Truck and load plan." "Yes, sir." "Justin, gate and street. Eyes only, nothing else." Justin nodded and was gone. "Sarah, medical supplies first. Everything in the go bags. Overflow into whatever hard cases we have. Grace, food stores with Olivia and Emily. Caloric density first. wait second. They scattered from the table and the house went from still to purposeful in 8 seconds. Mark grabbed the Glock from the counter and checked the chamber, a habit that had built itself in the last week without him intending it. He looked at the window one more time. The smoke at the seam was thicker than it had been. He went to the back door and stepped outside. The smell hit him before anything else, thick and chemical, burning insulation beneath the cleaner smell of wood. He looked south and saw what he hadn't been able to see from the yard earlier. The fire was in 2 places now, the original structure fully consumed, and something to its east, the neighboring house, with bright orange licking at the eaves and moving up. It had already jumped again. He didn't go back inside to change the timeline. He went to the truck. Segment 3. The packing was a kind of controlled grief. Mark had not anticipated that. He'd run the scenario in his head a dozen times. The day they might have to leave, what they'd take, the load order, the exit route, and he'd run it cold, the way he ran financials. Assets, liabilities, weight, volume, priority tier. He hadn't accounted for what it would feel like to watch Sarah move through their bedroom in the candlelight, pulling things she'd decided mattered, and leaving behind the ones she'd decided didn't. Photographs still on the dresser. Her sister's Bible. No, that came. The wedding picture on the nightstand. She touched the frame and didn't pick it up. He watched her for 2 seconds. Medical bags first, he said, then personal. I know, she said, quiet, not snapping, she knew. He went back to the hall to run the rest of the house. The food stores were in the basement, Sarah's 2 years of quiet preparation before the world ended. 6 5-gallon tubs of dry goods, rice, beans, oats, pasta, 2 flats of canned protein, water purification tablets, the hand crank radio, medical supplies in 2 hard cases, a camp stove with 6 fuel canisters, sleeping bags rated to 20 degrees, LED lanterns and lithium batteries. Not enough for 9 people long term. Way more than most families on this block had right now. Mark stood at the top of the basement stairs and did the load math. The F-250 had a 6.5-foot bed, food and hard cases in the bed under tarps, personal bags in the extended cab's rear floor wells. People in the cab, Mark driving, Sarah front passenger, 2 in back. The other 5 were going to be tight. John, he called down the hall. John Moon came from the direction of the kitchen. He had a hard case in each hand, Sarah's medical overflow, and was moving with the specific efficiency of a man who had packed under time pressure before. Tubs first, Mark said, heaviest down low in the bed, cases stacked on top. I know how to load a truck, not dismissive, just stated. He went past Mark toward the back door. The next 12 minutes were orderly chaos. John and Jake worked the basement together. 50-pound tubs, 2 men per tub, up the stairs, out the back door to the truck in 2-man carries. Mark directed from the driveway. Tubs first, heaviest and lowest in the bed, hard cases on top, soft bags in the gaps. He kept one eye on the load and one on the street. Grace and Emily moved through the kitchen with ruthless efficiency. Grace called each item. Canned salmon, yes. This pasta, how much? And Emily counted and packed without ceremony. 12 years old and gone somewhere calm and practical inside herself. Olivia carried smaller bags from the upstairs rooms to the back door without being asked, forming a relay between wherever Grace pointed and wherever Mark pointed, her thin arms working double time. No complaints. Sarah moved through the medical supplies with the focus she used in a trauma bay, sorting, discarding, packing by priority of irreplaceability. Things she could synthesize or substitute went last. Things she could never replace came first. Justin held the gate and the street, watching through the fence slats, calling it calm every 2 minutes. Casey patrolled. He moved a circuit of the house in and out through the back door, around the perimeter of the yard, back in. Not anxious, purposeful. He tracked each person, checked each room, came back to Mark periodically to confirm that Mark was still there and still operational. On his 4th circuit, he stopped at the back corner of the yard facing south, and his whole body went tight. Mark saw it. Casey. The dog looked at him over his shoulder. Back south, back at Mark. Jake, Mark called. Jake appeared in the doorway. Yeah. South corner, eyes on it. Jake moved to the corner, rifle at low ready. He looked south. He came back fast. Second house is going, he said. I can see the roof on fire from here. The Garcia fence is going to catch if the wind gusts. Garcia house, one house away. Mark looked at Sarah in the doorway behind Jake. She looked back at him. We're done here, she said, almost. He did a quick count. What was in the truck, what wasn't. 2 more tubs, the backup medical case. He pointed at John. Basement. John was already moving. Sarah came to him at the truck. She put her hand on his forearm. Not dramatic, just contact. Whatever we don't get, she said. I know. He looked at the house, where Jake had grown up, where Emily had been drawing pictures at the kitchen table the morning everything changed, where Casey had learned to open the pantry cabinet with his nose, where Sarah had built their survival position in quiet for 2 years before he'd bothered to notice. Yeah, he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. She heard it. Her hand tightened once on his arm and then she let go, because this wasn't the moment. She went back to the truck. The smoke was visible in the air now. Not just the smell, you could see it. A thinning gray haze at chest height catching the firelight from the south. Casey sneezed twice, sharp, hard, and shook his head. Load up, Mark said. Everyone in the truck, now. Grace was already moving, Olivia at her hip, Emily right behind them. John came back from the basement with the last tub by himself, impressive and marginally stupid, but there wasn't time to say so, and Mark caught one end, and they carried it to the truck together in silence. Jake came back from the southwest corner at a jog. 2 people on the street north of us, moving fast. One tried the Dunbar door. Give. Dunbar's been empty since day 2. He moved on. People moving north on foot. People who understood what was happening and had no vehicle. People who might see a running truck and make decisions about that. Get in, Mark said, middle seat. Jake went without arguing. A week ago, he might have argued. Mark did a final walkthrough. He'd told himself he wasn't going to. Waste of time. Emotional trap. He did it anyway. 30 seconds. Front rooms, hall, kitchen. He wasn't looking for anything he'd forgotten. He was just looking at it. The dining table. The kitchen where Sarah had started the hand crank radio the morning of day 0 and gotten the first confirmation of what was happening. The couch where Casey used to sleep before he'd moved himself to Emily's door. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He went up anyway. Walked to the bedroom. Picked up the wedding photo from the nightstand. Sarah hadn't taken it. And put it in his jacket pocket next to the child's drawing from the Halverson house. Then he came back down, went out the back door, pulled it shut behind him, and got in the truck. Segment 4. The truck started. First turn of the key, diesel engine catching, with that deep rumble. Mark let it idle 10 seconds. Not for the engine, for himself. A breath. The last time he would sit in this driveway on Claremont Court in Canton, Georgia, with this family in this truck before whatever came next. 9 people in an F-250 extended cabin bed, Mark driving, Sarah passenger, Jake and Justin in the rear seat, John Moon between them, Grace, Olivia, and Emily in the jump seats, Casey in the footwell between Emily and the door, his blocky head on her knee, amber eyes flat and alert. He rolled down his window and listened. Fire. South. A deep, broad crackling that ate other sounds. Someone's dog barking in the neighborhood. Not Casey, somebody else's. Alone and panicked at what was coming. And beneath it all, in the spaces, the quiet that wasn't peaceful. Everyone accounted for, Sarah said from beside him. She'd done the count without being asked. He put the truck in reverse and backed out slowly. No headlights. Headlights at 3:40 in the morning on a post-collapse residential street were a lighthouse. He knew the cul-de-sac blind. Parking lights only barely aglow. And he was moving. The truck eased onto the street. He cut the wheel, straightened, put it in drive. Under 10 miles per hour, 2 shapes on the sidewalk to the north. People on foot, moving. Not oriented toward the truck. Or not oriented enough to do anything about it yet. He accelerated through the cul-de-sac onto the connecting street. Still no headlights. Still under 15. The smoke was heavier here, visible in the parking lights. Gray drift across the road at bumper height, swirling in the truck's wake. In the mirror, he could see the glow behind them, bigger than it had been, painting the sky above what used to be his neighborhood in colors he didn't have names for. Route 140 North, Sarah said. She'd been navigating from memory since they'd moved. North Metro Atlanta girl. She knew these roads. Then up to 5, mostly residential for the first 8 miles. What's on 5 North? Cherokee County first, then Pickens, then the Toccoa River country. Mountains after that, John said from the back seat. Higher elevation, Mark said. Lower population density. Prevailing wind from the west means less fallout contamination the farther north and east we go. Route 140, Sarah said. Turn coming. He made the turn. They made it 6 blocks before the roadblock. A pickup stopped crosswise in the road. 2 men on the driver's side, a third in the shadow of the passenger side. The truck was positioned at an angle that ate most of the lane. Not an accident, a position. Mark stopped the F-250 30 yards out. His headlights were still off. They might not have seen him yet. The fire behind him was throwing enough ambient light that he wasn't invisible. But in a dark cab on a dark street, it was possible he'd stopped far enough back. Roadblock, he said, flat. See it, Jake said. Rifle up. Not pointed, just ready. Justin tracking the same line. 3 visible. Could be more in the bed. John said nothing. He was already reading the gap on the passenger side of the stopped truck. Sarah had her Glock out and low in her lap. Grace had one arm across Olivia, covering her. Olivia didn't flinch. Emily's hand was on Casey's back. They saw us, Emily said, quiet, certain. She was right. One of the men had turned and was looking directly at the F-250. They'd stopped too fast. The brake lights had lit them up. Options, Sarah said. Mark was running them. Reverse. Back into smoke and fire. Hard right. Unknown subdivision. Unscouted. Stay. Not viable with one man already moving toward them from the roadblock. Or through, accelerate past, using the truck's mass and the 12-foot gap on the passenger side of the stopped vehicle. 12 feet of gap. The F-250 ran about 8 feet wide, 4 feet of clearance. John said from the back seat quietly, There's a side street behind us on the right, 30 yards back. I clocked it when we passed. Mark checked the mirror. The side street was there. Subdivision mouth, no visible blockage. They'll see us reverse, Jake said. They already know we're here, John said. Reverse is less risk than 4 feet of clearance in the dark. A beat. The man from the roadblock was 40 feet away now and closing. Reverse, Mark said. He put it in reverse and kept his foot light. No brake lights, backing at a controlled pace. Not panicked, not fast enough to attract a shot, until he felt the intersection behind him. Then he cut hard right and drove into the subdivision mouth without headlights. Drove 200 yards on the dark residential street until it curved parallel to the main artery, found the next intersection, turned left, came back out onto the main road 2 blocks north of the roadblock. He put the headlights on low beams, far enough north now. The road north opened ahead of them. You okay back there? He said to the whole rear of the truck. Justin said yeah. Jake said nothing. He was still running the threat assessment, which was correct. Emily said, Casey's okay, which was not the question, but was exactly the right answer for Emily. Grace said, thank you, God. Not loudly, just saying it. John Moon said nothing. He was watching the road behind them through the rear window with his dark eyes steady and flat. They following, Mark said. Not yet, John said. Give it a minute. Mark gave it a minute. The road behind stayed dark. Probably nothing, Sarah said. She didn't sound convinced. Probably, Mark agreed. He didn't either. He held 30 miles per hour north and kept his eyes on the road ahead. Behind them, visible in the mirror when the road curved right, the glow of what used to be his neighborhood painted the southern sky. He did not look back again. Sarah was working the hand crank radio, volume low, scanning, static on most channels, a voice on one, distant, in and out. Cherokee County community frequency, repeat. Anyone in the county receiving, we are operating at an alternate location. Do not approach the county courthouse. Then static. Cherokee County, she said. We're on the north edge of Cherokee County, Mark said. Someone's broadcasting locally. She paused. That's not nothing. No, he agreed. It's not. He kept driving. The truck ate the dark miles north, and the smoke in the air thinned, and the sky ahead was darker and less orange than the sky behind. Route 5 was coming. In the back seat, Emily spoke. There's a church on Route 5, she said, brick with a cemetery beside it, set back from the road. It has a big metal outbuilding behind it. Silence. Emily Grace Methodist, she said. Mom drove past it every time we went to see Grandma Patton in Ellijay. I always counted the headstones. 47. Some of the old ones are barely readable. Mark looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Mark. Metal doesn't burn, Emily said, and it's set back from the road, so you can't see it from a car going by unless you're looking. Justin said, she's not wrong. John said, brick sanctuary for concealment from the road, metal outbuilding for shelter. Cemetery on one side means no structure on that flank. A pause. Worth a look. Jake made a sound, not a joke laugh, the sound of someone who's been outmaneuvered by a 12-year-old and finds it, despite everything, a little bit right. Grace said quietly, Emily. Ma'am? Thank you. Emily said nothing. She was looking out the window at the dark fields passing, one hand on Casey's back. Route 5, Mark said. We assessed the church. He held the speed and kept driving north and thought about the word assess and what it had cost him to get to the point where that was the plan. A church his daughter had navigated to from a count of 47 headstones, seen out a car window on the way to visit a grandmother who was not a factor in this world anymore. He drove. Segment 5. Emily Grace. Methodist Church was dark and looked abandoned in the way most things looked abandoned now, not ransacked, just empty. The parking lot was bare. The sanctuary windows were black. The big red oak out front dropped a leaf across the windshield. As Mark turned the F-250 off Route 5 onto the gravel drive at a slow crawl, no headlights, engine down to idle. He stopped the truck 40 yards from the sanctuary. Stay in, he said. He and John got out. Mark with the Glock. John with the compact fixed blade he kept on his right hip. He carried it the way he carried everything, visible only when you were already looking. They walked the approach in silence, splitting automatically. Mark to the main entrance. John swinging wide to the right to get the flank view on the cemetery side. Two men who hadn't talked about how to do this, but who both understood how to do it. The sanctuary main door was padlocked from the outside. Hasp and padlock, not a deadbolt. It hadn't been locked from inside, which meant no one was sheltering in the building. Which was information. John came around the far side of the building, shook his head once. Clear. They moved together through the cemetery, 47 stones, some old enough to be barely legible in the dark. The grass between them hadn't been cut in a couple of weeks, long enough to show in the ankle of the stride. The metal outbuilding was behind the cemetery, separated from it by a strip of mowed ground. Sliding door on a horizontal track. Standard hardware store padlock. Mark checked it. Not new. Combination type. The kind that came preset to 0000 because people never changed them. He dialed 0000. The shackle released. John said, the sound of a man who'd expected it and was still vaguely pleased to be right. Mark slid the door open 6 inches and held there, listening. No movement inside. No smell of recent habitation. No body odor, no food smell, no fire smell beyond what was on the general air from the south. He pushed the door the rest of the way, and they both went in. The outbuilding was maybe 40 feet by 30. Concrete floor, metal walls and roof, corrugated, the kind that drummed in rain. 3 riding mowers parked to the left, all gas-powered. A stack of 5-gallon fuel cans against the right wall. 4 of the cans felt heavy when Mark lifted one. A workbench along the back wall with tools racked above it. A folding table and 4 stackable chairs. 2 chest freezers, both unplugged, both empty, and open-doored. Mark stood in the middle of the concrete floor and looked at the fuel cans, then at the ceiling, solid, no gaps, no rust through, then at the door track, sliding metal door that could be barred from the inside with a piece of the lumber stacked to his right. It'll do, John said. Yeah, Mark said. He went back outside and waved the truck up. Justin pulled the truck forward and parked it behind the sanctuary, out of the line of sight from Route 5. He'd moved to the driver's seat while Mark and John were clearing. Not asked, just done. The same way he was starting to do a lot of things. Mark noticed it and filed it. They unloaded in stages. The food tubs went against the right wall of the outbuilding under tarps. The hard cases went to the workbench. Sleeping bags and personal bags went to the back corner where the concrete was dry. Sarah set up the medical case immediately, her hands moving through it in the dark with the certainty of someone who'd checked its contents enough times that she could do it blind. Grace found a ground cloth in the gear and spread it in the corner farthest from the door. She guided Olivia to it without speaking. Olivia sat and leaned against her mother's shoulder and closed her eyes. She was asleep in under 2 minutes. 11 years old, and she could do that. Drop into sleep because her body needed it regardless of circumstances. A skill she hadn't known she had before the world ended. Emily sat up next to them. She got out her sketch pad. She'd kept it somewhere, in the jacket pocket maybe, through the whole night, and sat with it in her lap in the dark without opening it, just holding it. Casey settled across the door threshold, half in and half out, and watched the cemetery and the dark beyond it. Mark and John took the first watch together. They stood outside the south wall of the outbuilding where the building's shadow absorbed them, and they could see the gravel drive in the back of the sanctuary and the road through the trees without being visible themselves. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. Then John said, "You've never moved a group before." "No, you did all right." Mark looked at him. John's profile was dark in the starlight, Korean-American, 36 years old, divorced, competent in a way that came from a different kind of life than the one Mark had been living. A cybersecurity consultant who trained in multiple martial art disciplines and who had arrived on foot at the Smith door 3 days ago with nothing but a pack and the specific calm of a man who'd already done whatever he needed to do to get there. "You could have run the load faster," Mark said, "and I had the load right. You were managing 9 people. That's different." A pause. The road was quiet. An owl somewhere in the trees to the north. "The roadblock," Mark said. 3 in front. Could have been a 4th in the bed. Could have been. They didn't pursue. "No." "Opportunists," John said. "Not organized. Organized people don't set up a single vehicle roadblock in the middle of the night with no communication layer. They do it in 2 positions with a spotter." He paused. "We'll see more organization as time goes on." "Not yet." Mark absorbed this. "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "It's what I used to get paid to think about," John said. "Infrastructure vulnerability. What happens when systems fail? Who fills the vacuum?" A beat. "The answer's always the same. Organized people fill it. Takes 6 to 8 weeks after a total collapse for the first real organized groups to harden. We're at week 2. "The Black Vultures," Mark said. John looked at him. This was the first time Mark had used that name to him. Mark had seen them at the stop and go. Disciplined, territorial, not random. The name had stuck. "Where'd you hear that name?" John said. "Spray paint. Back wall of the stop and go." Mark paused. "You recognize it?" John was quiet for a moment in the specific way that meant he was deciding how much to say. "I've seen the marking before, not here, not this context." He stopped there. Mark didn't push, not yet. Segment 6. Jake relieved them at 5:30. He came out of the outbuilding with Justin behind him, both of them moving in the dark, like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. Jake took the south position, and Justin moved to the gate end of the gravel drive to watch the Route 5 intersection. John went inside to sleep. Mark went inside to sit. The outbuilding smelled of gasoline and metal and old grass clippings. Sarah was asleep against the workbench, her back against the cabinet, her Glock on her thigh. Grace was asleep with Olivia. Emily was still awake. He could tell from her breathing, too slow and deliberate to be sleep. He sat down against the wall near the door and Casey came and lay across his feet. The weight of the dog was specific and grounding in a way Mark had no language for. 110 pounds of muscle and warmth across his boots, amber eyes open in the dark, watching the cemetery through the gap in the door. Casey understood something that Mark was still catching up to. The job doesn't stop because you're tired. You close your eyes and your nose keeps working. You slow your body and your ears keep moving. Mark closed his eyes and his brain kept running numbers. He came back up at 7:15 when Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. He hadn't slept. He'd rested, which was different. Light, she said. She meant daylight, which was coming through the gaps in the metal walls in thin horizontal bars. He stood up, worked the stiffness out of his back, and went to the door. The world outside was gray and cold and quiet. Frost on the cemetery grass. The oak out front had dropped more leaves overnight. Route 5 was visible through the tree screen. Empty, nothing moving. The road sitting still and pale in the early light. Jake and Justin were still on position. They'd been out there 2 hours. "Anything?" Mark said when he got to Jake. "One vehicle north around 6, Jake said. "Pickup, moving fast. Didn't slow for the church. Nothing since." He paused. "Sky to the south is still hazy." Mark looked south. Jake was right. The sky above the distant rooftops, barely visible at this range, just a smear on the horizon, was still carrying the dirty orange-brown of large area smoke. The fire hadn't been a small event. It was possible the whole block had gone. His house. He looked at it for a moment, then he looked at the road. John Moon came out of the outbuilding at 7:40. He'd slept 2 hours and looked like it was enough, which was irritating in an objective way that Mark recognized and set aside. "We need to make a decision about how long we stay here," John said. "I know. This is a good position for 12 hours. After that, the fuel cans in the truck become known locally. Churches get checked. Someone's going to drive this road and see the gravel track used. How long do you think we have before someone checks?" "Today's early. Tomorrow's less safe." He paused. "The radio last night. Cherokee County Community Frequency. That's someone who knows the local topology and is broadcasting. We should try to raise them." "And tell them where we are?" "Tell them we're mobile and ask for destination intel. Don't give coordinates." He looked at Mark steadily. "They may know about organized positions, road conditions, hostile group locations. We're operating blind on everything north of here. That radio signal is information we don't have." Mark thought about it, the specific calculus of reach-out risk against information value. In finance, it would have been a simple ratio, cost of the call versus yield of the data. In collapse, it was the same math with a lethal downside. "We try to raise them at noon," he said. "Short contact, mobile framing, no location." John nodded. Sarah had set up a cold breakfast. No fire, smoke discipline, from the canned goods. Canned salmon, dried fruit, crackers. She moved through it with the same organized focus she moved through everything. Grace helped her without being asked, quietly. The two women working in the small space the way they'd been working together for over a week. Their communication compressed to looks and small gestures. Olivia ate quickly and without complaint. She was watching the outbuilding door the way children in this world had learned to watch open spaces. Emily had her sketch pad open. She was drawing the outbuilding interior. Mark caught a glimpse, the riding mowers in their row, the angle of light through the wall gaps, Casey's silhouette in the doorway. The proportions were accurate. She was drawing what was there, not what she wanted to be there. He didn't say anything about it. Justin came in from the drive to eat. He sat across from Jake and they talked in low voices. Not tactical, something mundane. Mark couldn't catch the words. And for a moment they were just two 19 and 17-year-olds sitting in a shed eating crackers at 7 in the morning, which was not what their lives were supposed to look like, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so. Segment 7. The noon radio contact took 4 tries. Sarah operated the hand crank. She'd been working the frequency since 9, listening without transmitting, trying to map the broadcast pattern. It wasn't continuous. It came at intervals, scheduled. At 11:40, she caught the beginning of a broadcast and they listened without responding. A man's voice, calm and measured, reading off a list of route conditions north of Canton. Highway 5 clear to Jasper as of yesterday morning, a section of 53 blocked by a vehicle pile east of Tate, a location near Ball Ground, with hostile activity, Do not stop. Ball ground. Mark knew ball ground, 12 miles north. He'd driven through it 100 times on weekend trips to the mountains. At noon, she transmitted. Short, scripted. Mark had written it out on a piece of cardboard in block letters. Mobile group north of Canton County line. 9 people. Requesting destination intel. Not giving location. Over. She read it flat, no inflection, twice, static, then. Mobile group, this is Cherokee County Community, copy. Understand you are north of county line. 9 persons, mobile. We are operating out of a fixed position in Pickens County. Route 5 north is best current corridor. Avoid 53 east of Tate. There is a community position at a church camp off 5-mile marker 31. Managed. They are taking families. Over. A church camp. Mile marker 31. Managed position. Taking families 40 miles north. Sarah looked at Mark. He was already doing the math. Managed position could mean anything, Jake said. He'd been listening from the door. Could mean a lot of things, Mark agreed. Could mean organized mutual aid. Could mean a faction running intake. Could mean exactly what they said, Sarah said. John said, the broadcast has been consistent for at least 2 nights. That's infrastructure. Someone with a generator or solar running a repeater. That's not a fast setup. He paused. Doesn't mean it's safe. Does mean it's real. Real and safe aren't the same thing, Mark said. No, John agreed. But 40 miles is doable today if the road holds. We assess at the gate, not from inside. The group was quiet. Then Grace said from the back corner, there are children here. Not a demand, a fact in the conversation. Mark looked at her. She was sitting with Olivia, her dyed blonde hair flattened from sleep, her hands folded in her lap. She was looking at him with the steady look she used when she was waiting for the right decision to be made without telling him what it was. He thought about the church they were sitting in. Good for one night. John had said it. Today safe, tomorrow less so. The fuel cans bought them mobility, but not position. 9 people in an outbuilding with no defensible perimeter and a road 30 yards away that anyone driving north could turn off of. We go, he said. We assess at the gate like John said. If it's wrong when we get there, we don't go in. Nobody argued. They broke camp in 20 minutes, cleaner than the house had been. There was less to move, and they'd gotten faster. John topped off the truck's tank from 2 of the 5-gallon diesel cans, efficiently, no spillage. Jake and Justin loaded the tubs. Emily folded the ground cloth and handed it to Grace without being asked. Olivia carried bags to the truck in the same relay she'd run the night before. Casey made one circuit of the cemetery before they left. He walked the perimeter of the stones, nose down, reading the ground. He stopped once near the far corner, a longer pause, something in the air, and then continued and came back to the truck and climbed in. Mark watched him. Whatever Casey had smelled at the far corner of the cemetery, it wasn't enough to stop the departure, but it was enough to note. He filed it and got in the truck. Route 5 north. The road was quiet in the way empty roads were quiet now. Not traffic light quiet, not early morning quiet. The stillness of a road that had stopped serving its original purpose. Twice in the first 10 miles, they passed abandoned vehicles. Once a pickup on the shoulder with both doors open and nothing inside. Once a minivan in the center lane with its hazard lights still flashing. Battery not yet dead. A detail that was somehow more unnerving than a dead car. The group in the truck was quiet, not tense, depleted. The specific quiet of people who'd been running on adrenaline and were now running on the remnant of it. Grace had her eyes closed and her lips moving again. Justin had his head back and his eyes on the ceiling. Jake was watching his side window, cataloging the landscape. Emily had her sketch pad out and was drawing something Mark couldn't see from the driver's seat. John was watching the road behind them. Still clear, he said at the first curve. Still clear at the second. Mark kept 30 miles an hour, not fast enough to be reckless, fast enough that they were covering ground. The mountains appeared at the horizon around mile 20. Not dramatic. You could miss them if you weren't looking. A dark rise of ridgeline against the gray October sky, higher than everything south of it. The kind of high ground that said nothing about safety, but said everything about distance from the worst of what had happened in the cities. He'd always liked driving north. He liked it differently now. At mile marker 29, Sarah said, 2 miles. I know, Mark said. He slowed to 25. They were looking for the turnoff now, a church camp off Route 5, mile marker 31. He didn't know which side of the road. He didn't know what the gate would look like. Right side, Emily said from the back seat. The compass direction from the broadcast landmarks puts it east of the road. Mark glanced in the mirror at her. She had a hand-drawn compass rose on her sketchpad page. She'd been mapping the route. Right side, he confirmed. John said, slow down at 30. We look before we turn. If there's armed control on the gate, we don't roll up to it. We stop far enough out to turn around. Agreed. If it looks managed and not hostile, I get out first, before you roll the truck any closer. Mark looked at him. Why you? Because you have 9 people in this vehicle, John said, and I don't read as a threat to most people on a first look. He said it without ego, just stated. It was a good reason. Mark didn't like it and accepted it. Outrow. Mile marker. 31 came up on the right. Mark slowed to 10 miles per hour. The turnoff was there, a gravel lane between 2 fence posts, no gate hardware, just an opening in the tree line, a handmade sign on a post, block letters and black paint on whiteboard, Camp Ridge, community. Below it, smaller, all welcome, managed. Below that, smaller still, no unescorted vehicles past gate. Mark stopped the truck. He could see the lane for maybe 50 yards before it curved into the trees. No gate across the lane, no vehicles visible, no people visible. The sign said all welcome. The sign also said no unescorted vehicles past the gate. What gate? Jake said. Nobody answered. There was no visible gate. John said, I'm going to walk the lane. Not alone, Mark said. Yes, alone. If I go in with Jake behind me, it reads differently than one man walking up to see if someone's home. He put his hand on the door. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you leave. John, Grace. He said his sister's name. Just that. A look passed between them that carried the weight of whatever their relationship had been before the collapse and whatever it had become since. And Grace nodded. John got out of the truck and walked into the lane without looking back. Mark watched him disappear around the curve in the trees. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The truck was quiet. Casey was on high alert. His head was up, his ears forward, his amber eyes fixed on the lane entrance. His tail was straight and still. Grace had both hands folded in her lap, eyes closed. Olivia was watching the lane. Emily had her sketchpad closed. 10 minutes is a long time, Justin said. Shut up, Justin, Jake said. Not unkindly. Just because the math was already running and saying it out loud didn't help it. Sarah's hand was on Mark's forearm. He hadn't noticed when she'd put it there. 4 minutes in, Casey made a sound. Not a bark, a single low note at the back of his throat, barely audible. His head turned slightly. He'd heard or smelled something. He held the position, body taut, reading whatever was coming. Then he settled. A single exhale through his nose. Mark watched him. Casey was better at this than any of them. At 8 minutes, John came back around the curve in the lane. He was walking at a normal pace. His hands were loose, not running, not signaling. Mark watched his face as he came up to the driver's window. He'd learned to read John Moon's face in 3 days, which wasn't long, but was enough for the basics. John's face right now was neutral with something underneath it that was either assessment or caution. There's a position in there, John said, managed 60, maybe 70 people, armed entry team, 4 of them, positioned, not aggressive. They have a processing protocol. They ask questions. They verify. They assign a probationary period before you get full access to the camp. Probationary period, Mark said, 7 days. You're in the outer camp, not the inner compound. They watch you. A pause. That's not unreasonable, Sarah said. No, John said. It's what I'd do. Who's running it? Mark said. A man named Calloway, former pastor by the look of the setup. Cross on the main building. They're praying at meals. A beat. The entry team leader mentioned 2 things I want to flag. First, they've had 3 attempts in the last week to send in people who were scouting for an outside group. They're aware of the black vultures by name. Mark felt it, the specific cold of a thing you'd hoped was local turning out not to be. And second, he said. John looked at him steadily. They've had 2 altered individuals come to the gate in the past 4 days. One presented as normal and got inside the perimeter before they identified what he was. The other one they stopped at the gate. They stopped him. The man at the gate stopped him, John said. He's dead now. The truck was very quiet. Mark looked at the lane. The sign. All welcome. No unescorted vehicles past gate. 60 or 70 people. Armed entry, processing protocol. A dead man at the gate from 4 days ago. The black vultures by name, known to this position. 7 days probationary before you were inside the real wire. He thought about the 9 people in this truck. The food in the bed, the fuel. 2 hard medical cases. No fixed position. A clear road that wouldn't stay clear. John's timeline. Organized groups hardening in weeks, not months. The black vultures as a name on spray paint at the stop and go. And now as a name at a camp 40 miles north. He thought about Sarah's face when the smoke had come through the window seam, the wedding photo in his jacket pocket, Emily's 47 headstones. "What do you think?" he said to John. John looked at the lane for a long moment. "I think the risk of going in is real," he said. "I think the risk of not going in is also real. I think you have children in this truck, and we've been mobile for 6 hours, and mobile isn't a long-term solution." A pause. "I think the man who runs that camp made the same calculation about his people that you're making about yours." Mark sat with it. Sarah said, "If we don't go in, where do we go tonight?" Nobody had an answer to that. "We go in," Mark said. 7-day probationary. We comply with the protocol. We stay together and we assess from inside. John nodded. Jake nodded once. Justin beside him. Grace said, "Lord, let this be right." Mark put the truck in gear and turned onto the gravel lane. They were 40 yards in, the tree line closing on both sides of the lane, the sanctuary of the camp just beginning to show itself through the trunks. A roof line, a fence line, the shape of structures. When Casey went rigid. Not alert. Not the standard posture he ran when something was at the edge. This was different. His whole body locked, every muscle contracted at once, and his lips pulled back from his teeth without a sound. Emily's hand tightened on his back. "Dad." Her voice was very quiet. Mark was already breaking. "What is it?" "Something's wrong." She wasn't looking at Casey. She was looking left, into the trees on the north side of the lane. "Something in the trees. He's been tracking it for the last 20 yards. Mark stopped the truck. The lane was still. The trees on both sides were ordinary October trees, bare branches, some remaining leaves, gray light filtering down. Nothing visible. Casey did not move, did not look away. His lips were still pulled back, his amber eyes fixed on a specific point in the tree line to the left, a point that from the driver's seat Mark could not identify. John had his hand on the door. "Don't open the door yet," Mark said. John held. The trees were still. The lane was still. The camp was 40 yards ahead, and somewhere in the tree line to the left, at a point that a 110-pound American Pit Bull Terrier was absolutely certain about, something was watching them come in, something that had not been at the gate, something that was here now.
This is not over.